Okay. Shall we get started? Are we all ready? We've got Janet and Tony with us.
Yep.
I can't see Janet.
I can. She's there. She's waving, so we're okay.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I need to get a bigger screen, Janet. I'm sorry. Okay. Right. Just so those people that are joining in this, just to go up to date, up to speed, one of the candidates has withdrawn their nomination, James Booth, and we have a pre-recorded statement from one of the candidates, Andrea, because of personal circumstances had led to the fact that she just couldn't make today, and it was a last-minute decision, and it wasn't an option we were passing out to everybody, I have to say. Right. We're going to be really fair through these hustings, and you're going to do your introduction, which is a 3-minute introduction. Tom Franklin has been really keen with his finger on that stopwatch, so don't feel offended if you get cut off. And I'm trying to give you a little bit of an indication by giving you a T for time, but if you can't respond to that, then you're going to get cut off. Then you've got your summing up. Now, because we have less candidates and therefore less time needed for answering questions, I've extended the time for you to answer questions from 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. And we got a lot of questions in the first session. We got 9 good questions, so hopefully we can do the same here. And the tone of it was absolutely brilliant, so let's maintain that throughout. We are going to, as I say, really fair. So Tom's introduced a system of deciding which order is his algorithm, or whatever he calls it. Tom, is it the second letter of the first name decides it? You know, rather bizarre, but that sort of explains us, doesn't it, Greens? So we're going to go down and we're going to start with the introductions. I'm going to give you the order, okay? It's going to be Nick, then Cleo, then Amelia, then a recorded statement from Andrea, and then Tom. And then I've got a tombola style way of deciding who answers questions first, and to make it as fair as possible for everybody. So I will call your name when it's your turn to answer the question. All right. Are we ready, Tom? Tom Franklin, sorry.
Yes.
So let's get started with the first candidate with their presentation. 3 minutes from Nick, please.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Humberstone and I'm standing to be your next deputy leader. I really want politics to be for everyone. We have to remember that politics is about people coming together and deciding how they want society to be. And right now, those decisions aren't made by everyone, they're made by a small group. We can see it in Parliament and we can see it in our own membership as well, that politics isn't diverse and we aren't a diverse movement, and those things have to change. We have to address diversity. Diversity is really important. It's not just a way to get more votes. It's about having more voices in the room and listening to those voices, because those voices will make sure our policy is better and make sure people are supporting us because of our policies, not just because we have a more diverse membership as a result. I really think that we should pay more attention to reaching out to new voters and more voters than we currently do. That includes a wider diversity of candidates. And there's kind of 3 main things that I want to do that tackle that and how we can make sure our movement is diverse and therefore become a better movement. The first one is language. We've got to remember that language is all about communicating messages. We use complicated words a lot of the time, and a lot of the time simple words would work just as well. I want politics to be for everyone, whether they were expelled from school or went to university, and whether English is their first, 4th or 5th language. So we need to be really careful about the words we choose to make sure that our message is clear to everyone and doesn't have confusion attached to it. As deputy leader, I'd constantly be challenging myself and others, as I do already, and I try to lead by example when speaking on TV and in the media. We also need to about the right policies. We're a political party, so we have to have an answer for everything. we need to show that we can deliver a society that tackles everything. That's inequality, discrimination, and also climate change. We can't expect those people that are in difficult circumstances where they're having to choose between heating their home and eating to care about the environment as much as we do. Being able to care about the environment is quite a privilege, and we need to make sure that we're delivering the social policies just as much as we are the environmental policies, because that's how we're going to win. If we get everyone on board for all the different policies that are more direct to different people, then we can make that change. The last one is working with others. I want to work with others because it's a good thing to do. I think we should try to do that where possible. It doesn't mean we'll always agree with other parties when we want to work with them, but we should be trying to, because that's the kind of society that we want, and that's the kind of politics we want to represent and make happen. I'll close with that. If you want politics to be about working together to deliver a society that works for everyone, then please make me your first choice for deputy leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Could I just say for people listening in, if you have a question, will you post it in the chat box? Would you prefix it with a capital Q, please? And then Tony and Janet will filter through the questions and try and bring some together that are similar so that we can get as many out as possible. Next person for their introduction then is Cleo. Welcome, Cleo.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm approaching all of these hustings as a learning opportunity, an opportunity for me to learn from you and hopefully perhaps you to learn something from me. That would be the ideal scenario for myself. Participation is really important in terms of how I go about things. And I also like to have different approaches, for example, using art and expression where words alone can sometimes fail. So with that in mind, I stretch my arms up and invite you to join me, seeing if anyone will. We're going to reach out towards the universe and we're going to bring that energy in and we're just going to center it down to the earth. And that is all about, for me, remembering that we're human beings and actually also, hopefully, putting a smile on people's faces, because actually one of my main goals in life and the main goal for my family, my community, our country is to be happy. I'm standing for this role and I believe I can build on my learning and leading success as the former Lord Mayor of Bristol. And that includes being an ambassador, a mediator, a listener, an advocate, and an enabler, someone who can go out to different communities, all communities, make conversations, converse with all different types of people, and hopefully make a difference. I would also continue to bridge the role as both an activist and an elected politician, because I am an elected councillor in Bristol and have been since 2016, but that hasn't stopped me from being a grassroots activist. I definitely see myself as someone who can learn and also walk with people and not talk over others who may not agree with our point of view. I have media and public speaking experience, both very important if you want to be the deputy leader. Cohesion is important to me, and joining up across cities, across the country, and globally. The most energized I've been in my Green Party journey was when we had the Global Greens Conference in 2017 in Liverpool. What a fantastic conference. I really was absolutely energized by it. And what I also realized is that it's so important that we link globally. So part of my action would be to work locally and globally, i.e. globally. I think it's really important to empower local organisers and grassroots movements. And again, going back to the global idea, let's understand that Indigenous, the concept of Indigenous, is both on our doorsteps, and the same things that are happening globally are happening locally. And I'm willing to stand and advocate for the marginalised. I have
Thank you. We're at the end of that. That's time up, Cleo. Thank you.
Okay.
Really interesting. And you did make me smile. And I think I pulled a muscle as well, but there you go. Okay, shows how unfit I am. Right, can we go on to Amelia, please? And please, Amelia, don't make me exercise.
Thank you very much. I'm Amelia Womack, and after you've elected me for 3 terms as Deputy Leader, I'm hoping that you'll put your faith in me for another term as well. Throughout my years as Deputy Leader, we have had historic wins in general elections, European elections, council elections, and we know that next year will be a bumper year for those as well, with the elections that we would have had this year as well as the standard ones for 2021. This is going to be a tough time for us, but having worked on strategy and development of the party over the years, I know it's one that we can rise up to and one that we can continue to have our big wins. Next year, in that bumper year of elections, we also have the Welsh Assembly elections. As lead candidate for South Wales East, I want to use my platform as Deputy Leader to ensure that we make history and secure our first seat in the Welsh Parliament and ensure that our Green voice is heard for the first time, something that we so vitally need in Wales and something that we so vitally need for the Green Party of England and Wales. I have worked in communities across the country. With you, I've been with you on doorsteps. I've brought press and media opportunities to your campaigns. I believe that change happens at the grassroots, and I want to continue that work. I've also been on nearly every major news channel. I've taken on Piers Morgan, Andrew Neil. I've had articles in The Independent, The Guardian, The New Statesman, The Daily Telegraph, even Vogue magazine. I've even had my own column in The Independent during the general election to ensure that our unique green vision has been heard. During my years as well, I've worked to ensure that we tackle many issues in our party. I've worked on diversity and have worked to ring fence money for diverse candidates to ensure that we remove the barriers to people standing. I've also worked with cross-party to develop campaigns and letters to ensure that we're winning not just in elections, but we're winning on our messaging as well. I've worked on issues on women's rights, the Green New Deal. I've worked to challenge airport expansion. And it's been vital that we've had those wins, even without being elected in Parliament, to ensure that our message is constantly changing the course of our politics and our history. I know what we need as a party. I know that we can build on our success as the past. I know that our wins have been thanks to every individual member doing their bit, and I want to thank you all for everything that you've done to exceed our expectations time and time again. But we need to consistently be a political force to be reckoned with, and that's what you'll get with me if you vote for me first preference as Deputy Leader.
Gosh, spot on time as well. Okay, so this is a technical first from Tom. This is Andrea Carey Fuller's pre-recorded 3 minutes. It might take 10 minutes to get to it, but it's 3 minutes when we get there. Thank you, Tom, well done. Oh, maybe I said thank you too soon.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Carey Fuller, and today I'm doing this video because I wish to stand for Deputy Leader of the Green Party. I'm a non-practicing human rights barrister, and I've always felt very strongly about issues of equality and social justice. And I've been working a lot behind the scenes for many years for the Green Party on lots of different campaigns, trying to save Tidemill Wildlife Garden, to campaigning for more social housing for people, to stopping TTIP. I really want to bring all the skills that I've used in that in terms of speaking up publicly, campaigning in terms of arranging collaborations with other people to all come together on an issue, and to bring some sort of drive and energy into the Green Party. My vision for deputy leader is somebody who is not just a face as part of the Green Party, but somebody that actually encourages, supports and enables other people from the Green Party to have more of a public face too. Sometimes I've felt that there's only a very small minority of people that have been put forward publicly by the Green Party, and we have an amazing diversity of people and a diversity of experience within the Green Party, and I would work to make sure that those people come to the forefront in relation to whatever topics and issues it is that we go forward and campaign on. Suspending the right to buy for council social housing for 5 years in all the English cities. But moreover, it's because we're in such a housing crisis at the moment, and if people don't have a place they can call their own, a home, they've got no dignity and they've got no sense of security from which to build their lives. Issues such as career breaks and what that does to women, you know, because if they choose to have children and then want to carry on with their career, often they miss out on promotions. There's been quite a good lot of publicity lately around women who are menopausal and getting them needing extra support and understanding at that time in jobs or in any part of their life. There's lots of issues that need raising. Half of our party are women, 51% of the UK population are women. We need to make sure that our women feel supported, protected, enabled and empowered to come forward. And I'd like to see at the next general election at least half of the candidates standing as women.
Thank you. Tom, can you bring us back to real time? Thank you. Right, we move on now to Tom Pashby. Your 3 minutes, Tom.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'll wait for the thing to start. Cool. Hi everyone, my name's Tom Pashby. I'm running to be Deputy Leader of the Green Party. I joined the Green Party when I realised the other political parties had failed to protect our environment. I believe my broad experience in the party, helping others get elected and putting myself forward for public office in a wide range of political contexts places me well to be a voice for the party in England and Wales. So my first experience of the party really was messaging Natalie Bennett on Twitter, and that conversation led to me setting up Young Greens at Plymouth University. And that was in 2013. And since then, I've gone on to run in 2 general elections, most recently in 2019. And 3 local council elections. And I've been on the Young Greens executive and the Green Party executive, so I already kind of know how the party works quite well. So we know that capitalism has failed and is wrecking people's lives and our planet. The Green Party has a fantastic policy platform, which says we need to do more to move away from consumption-based growth, concentrating wealth into the hands of the few, and towards a localised circular economy, which values well-being. To those who think we should try to establish a politics beyond left and right, that's simply not the world we live in. People want to know where we stand, and we stand firmly on the side of those most marginalised communities, the key workers keeping the country going, and the campaigners who believe that we can act now to avert the climate crisis. A universal basic income on top of a reformed welfare state, a Green New Deal with 1 million high-quality green jobs. All of these are great policies, and we agree that they're great and just as decided by conference. But by shying away from being clear about our politics, we do ourselves a disservice. Another great green policy is our commitment to the rights of trans and non-binary people. Greens have spent years writing great policies on LGBTIQA+ rights, but a small vocal minority of people in the party have put our credibility with that community at risk. As a non-binary person myself, I'm acutely aware of how damaging that small number of voices can be. Risking our credibility like this makes it more difficult for us as a party to take action on the climate emergency. The 2019 general election saw our most recent attempt to reach across party lines and to put simpler choices to voters at the ballot box in order to get out the Tories and to stop Brexit. Labour largely ignored the Unite to Remain alliance, and the Prime Minister got a massive majority. We need to recognise that attempts at electoral pacts have failed and we need to move on. As your deputy leader, I will use my influence to argue against further such experiments and seek to ask all voters in England and Wales to vote Green. We've seen that what one Green in the room can do. The climate emergency and impacts of austerity can't wait for us to find the perfect electoral pact. We need to be ambitious and aim for Greens in government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, right. Just another advert that if you have just joined us, please put any questions in the chat box and prefix the question with a capital Q so we know it is a question, not just some comment. Right, and I did sort of come up with this fairness approach to answering the question. So as we go through, all of you get a chance to be the first person and the last person that answers the questions. Can we have the first question, please, Tony?
Yes, this is a question from Tom Franklin, and it's to everyone, and it's, what Green Party policy do you not support and why?
Okay, right. First person on this occasion is Cleo.
To be honest, I've not yet come across one that I haven't supported that's been brought to my attention. So I think I need to do a bit more research to find something. But if anyone wants to chuck one at me that they don't support, I can consider that one in the 1 minute 48 I've got left. Any volunteers? No. Well, there's nothing that I've come across that, you know, screams at me, that's a huge problem, or that I've heard necessarily in the press or media or social media that's jumped out at me at all. So I think externally, as far as I can perceive, things aren't so bad, but I am getting information, particularly since I've decided to stand, of internal issues and perhaps conflicts within the party, which really, really concerns me. It doesn't just concern me on differing ideology, but what concerns me is of people's experiences of how they feel they've been treated internally, and I think that needs to be addressed. I think so, we're not always going to agree on things, and that's why conferences is important, to make it more accessible, so that people who can't actually attend conference still get a say in terms of when we are developing policies, so that we are able to reach our thousands of members, so that we can get an accurate consensus. And then if people still don't agree on particular policies, how we talk to each other, how we communicate, how we decide to maybe park an issue if it comes to that, and move on and agree and align with things that we can agree on, I think is absolutely crucial in the direction of challenge. I think I would not support getting distracted over different things that we can't agree on, because we've got so much that we need to do pushing forward. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Cleo. And just as a typical Green approach to it, I allowed you 2 minutes of not answering the question. Okay. Well done.
That's very patronising, if I must say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologise. Okay. It's my sense of humour. I am sorry. Right. The next person to come back on that question is Nick.
Yeah, I'd kind of say the same, Cleo, in terms of I mean, I'm 24. I've only been political since about 21. Before that, I thought politics was terrible and it was very problematic. So I don't know every single policy we had. I spent quite a bit of time reading through it to get more of an understanding. When it comes to the philosophical values, I really agree and align with those, and that's why when I was looking to get into politics, I chose Green over Labour. I don't have a specific one I disagree with. I know there's been some concern lately, mostly on Twitter, to be honest, about whether we should be supporting HS2 or not, also with nuclear. And also in the past, I know some people that have completely not considered us purely on our stance on GMOs. I don't know the full evidence of those. So whenever I come across a policy that I don't know enough about, I'll go away and read it. I've recently been doing that with the issue to do with trans rights within the party. I went away and read the whole Gender Recognition Act document. So I now have a position on that. Yeah, there's nothing specific. That's all there really is to say. And it's not our job to decide what policies are or not. We have a really good system where the members are there to decide it. I was amazed to find out that the Labour Party don't let the members choose the policy. So if the membership think it's good, I probably think it's good too.
Thank you, Nick. Right. So the next person is going to be Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, just to kind of reiterate a point that Nick just made, it is really important to clarify that like the Green Party members make policy. So if we do have personal disagreements with it, then we should be making clear that if we were elected as deputy leader, for instance, we should be making clear that those are like personal views and not necessarily the party's. I was asked this in a recent interview with Bright Green, and I really struggled, and I had to like go away and look at policies to find one to disagree with. And I actually recently found out that we dropped our Robin Hood tax policy, the financial transactions tax, and I think that is something that we should probably bring back, because from my perspective, it seems like a really simple thing that would, you know, be a very small levy on huge volumes of money changing hands. And that could be used for things that are democratically decided as being good for the country by the government. I think I managed to nail that in about 60 seconds, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, so the next person on this particular question is Amelia.
Thank you. I agree with Tom on that Robin Hood tax point, and there are a couple of other things that I think are missing, not just for their economic power, but also for their symbolism of exactly what we stand for as a party, that we will make sure that we tackle tax evasion, we will make sure that we share wealth equally, as well as making sure that we protect the environment for future generations. But there is one policy that has always felt a little bit uncomfortable to me, and that's our policy to ban zoos. I feel that zoos, I think that we need to ensure that animal welfare is at the heart of everything that we do. But the role of zoos currently has aspects of using the animals as ambassador species. And it's not something I'd want to specifically talk about without there being a clearer role of what that actually looks like in terms of what it means for the animals that are currently in zoos, and what it means to make sure that we are protecting species that are currently at risk. So I think we've got a whole wealth of policies, and thank you to everyone that is fundamental to that policy making process. That means that we've got such spectacular radical angles on so many different points, but if I was just going to question one, it would probably be that one.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And that's it on that question, but there has been a comment about my comments, so just to say I do apologise, Cleo. I wasn't meant to be trying to be patronising. All I was referring to was the fact that you had nothing at all against any of the policies. That was all. And then you went on to a wider issue. That was all. I wasn't being unkind, hopefully. And I hope you accept my apology.
Nick answered the question either then on that basis.
Pardon?
Nick didn't have a policy either that he didn't agree with.
No, okay, fair comment, yeah. Okay. Right, so the next question, please, Tony.
Okay, this is a question from Robbie Spence, and it's a simple question to all candidates. What is a woman? Question, simple question to all candidates. What is a woman? Okay, right. The first person to come on this question is Nick.
This happens a lot, like in politics generally. We try to simplify things down to just the definition of something. Yesterday, lots of people were talking about, you know, what socialism is and what it means to different people. It's kind of the same here. I don't think we're going to get to any good solution on this issue if we're trying to define a word, because people have different interpretations of that, and I don't think it's a solution to it. That's all I really have to say. I don't think it's a very productive question, to be honest.
Okay, thank you for that. Tom, your views on this one?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what Nick has just said, but I'd just like to draw people's attention to a poll which got published, I think it was last week on the 9th of July. A majority of women in the UK support trans people's rights to self-identify, despite years of relentless transphobia. That's a headline. And I mean, it does come from a place of bad faith, I think, because it's a very simple question, but obviously it's heavily loaded. And I don't think we should be getting into, you know, political debate about the specifics of what it is to be a woman, because like a cis woman that can't give birth is no less of a woman, and you can apply that to people that identify as women. They're not all going to be in, you know, the same exact characteristics. Some women are more feminine, some women are more masculine. So yeah, it's not really something that we should be debating, because I think that a lot of people here know what a woman is, quite frankly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Amelia, what's your view on this question?
Thank you. I agree as well that I don't think we can talk about this in binary choices. It's more complex than that. As a proud feminist, my feminism has always been intersectional. I am very proud of the trans women that I work with, whose experiences have strengthened parts of our movement and ensured that we're challenging the bigger issues at hand, and that is the patriarchal systems that oppress all women. I think it's important that we work together with all of our sisters to ensure that essentially we smash the patriarchy, because that's what's driving inequality for so many people and driving so many problems that we have for women, trans women, and those and non-binary people as well.
Thank you very much. And finally, Cleo.
Well, I think I'd like to say that for me, the Green Party does represent equality, and that's something that comes across very well. For me personally, I believe in diversity and unity within diversity, and I think very often our differences are what make us collectively very, very strong. I would also like to say I've become, without having had time yet to dig into all the ins and outs, as I've expressed in my previous question, very disappointed to hear of rows. Internal rows is the only way I can frame it, to be honest, between different important and key members of our movement, of our Green Party community. This really concerns me. I would like to think that I could communicate, meet people and understand their views so that we could better move forward together, because there's obviously some conflict going on. But to answer the question very, very briefly, after having rambled a little, being a woman is an attitude.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, can we move on to the next question, please, Tony?
Okay, to all candidates, this is from Janet Russell. What are the two things that the Green Party has that will attract more voters? And what two things are the party's biggest risks?
Right, so there's two, again, just quite, what's the first two?
I'll read it out again. What are the two things that the Green Party has that will attract more voters? And what two things are the party's biggest risks?
Thank you. Right, on this one, starting with Tom, please.
I was just about to make some notes and try and think of some. So I don't know if I'll be able to do two for each, but that we already have that can attract more votes. I think that our great policy platform, we've got a fantastic policy platform and it's very popular. I think that we regularly see national polls that show that our policies are actually very popular, and when people do these political compass tests, they come back saying that they really support a lot of green policies, but then end up voting for other parties. So kind of attached to that, I think that we also have great potential with a more effective and probably better funded communications infrastructure, be it more reactive social media, a professionalized videography function that we can get content out quickly with, that sort of thing. That's sort of, I guess, 1.5. And the party's biggest risks. That's a really big one. I'm not really sure. I think I'd probably need to look at some data to really give a properly clear answer about that. But from my perspective, I mean, as kind of Cleo alluded to just a bit earlier about the rows that go on in the party, which can sometimes mean that it looks like we're not quite sure about where we stand on a particular issue. So I guess actually a lack of clarity about where we stand on certain things be it trans rights or nuclear power or GMO or any of those kind of well, controversial issues. It's a risk that we run if we don't decide on what we want to be saying on that as a party and communicate that effectively. That's only one thing, but I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on this question is Amelia, please.
Thank you. I think that as Greens, we've been clear for so many decades on where we stand on the climate and the ecological emergency. And that campaigning and that speaking out about what the future can be has brought created a window of opportunity that essentially more and more people are prioritizing the climate and environment over other issues. So our Green New Deal, which I think, well, essentially a Green New Deal is Green Party policy repackaged, but they're challenging a lot of the big questions at the moment about what kind of future we can create, talking about a universal basic income, making sure that we're talking about public transport, renewable energy, and actually those genuine policies that can implement change to keep us below 1.5 degrees of warming while addressing inequality as well. But I think that our other powerful thing is that we work in communities, that local level. Community means something to everybody. And I think that Greens working hard and making change happen is so vital and one of our key strengths that attracts people time and time again. Even that community perspective that's about local business, about supporting our youth hostels, the very infrastructure of our social services that help support all of our work. But what I think could be a risk is our internal structures. I've been on the executive for 6 years. I was there while we were talking about the governance review. Now we're talking about the holistic review, and now we're looking to next steps. And I think it's really vital that using the internal work that we've been doing, as well as supporting our membership, that we get this finalised, because at the moment I think that we've been kicking things into the long grass, expecting the holistic or governance review to solve many of our internal structural issues. And the other thing is training. I think that there's a thirst for training across all parts of the party, and we don't have loads of money to put into these things. And I think that more training for candidates and people doing other work needs to be prioritised.
Thank you. Next person on this question is Cleo.
Thank you. So I think, the things that we are more typically known for is obviously our success, particularly as the rest of the country kind of wakes up to the reality of climate change. So obviously our stance on climate and the environment is one of our successes. Equally, our social values and our social policies, such as universal basic income and, has arisen many times, the idea of rent caps. I know Sian has mentioned this a lot in her campaigns in London, for example. So I think, some of these ideas, which some people may see as quite radical in some respect, are now becoming way more mainstream, particularly in the period that we're in now. So that is an opportunity there, as well as already a success. I think the risks that we have is the lack of obvious diversity in leadership and within the climate movement itself. And that goes both for race and also social economic background. And I would also say that the communication and mechanics between local equality groups, for example, and perhaps HQ needs to be developed. And if it isn't, that could be a major risk.
Thank you very much. And finally, Nick.
I think the main thing that we have that's really amazing is we're just ordinary people. It kind of surprises me that we never talk about the fact that in elections, the Labour Party and the Conservatives, they stand candidates from wherever they want in wherever they like. But we have local people in those communities who know and understand the people there standing. And I think that's a really strong point that we need to capitalise on. The kind of downside to that, I think I kind of split the question into two things that have a good and bad to them. The kind of downside to that is we are ordinary people, but we're not representative enough yet. We have to actively challenge that. At every point we need to be asking, is this decision being made considering diversity? Because if we're not, we're going to overlook it. It's happened before and it's going to continue to happen. The other thing is policies. I'm a huge policy nerd. I love policies. It's the reason why I was interested in the Greens. We have evidence-based policy. We have policy that kind of steps back and says, let's think about all this again. How could we start from scratch? How could this be completely different? And we can bring that radical different vision, which most other parties don't seem to be doing. They seem to be taking what we already have and seeing how can we tweak it a bit. The downside with that is that we haven't got the messaging right. When we talk about UBI and just say, oh my gosh, we should all support UBI, UBI is not one, like UBI means one thing, but to many different people, it means something different. I think UBI should be an amount that covers the roof over your head, your food and so on. Some people think it should just be a top-up fund to get you between jobs or allow you to explore a more creative job, which has a bit less security. But when we just talk about things just as plain as like, oh, support UBI, we should instead be clear about the details and do it in a way that's clear and simple and not, you know, a 3-page document. Thank
you very much. Okay. Right, Tony, can we have the next question, please?
Okay, this is from Emma Bateman, and it is, I am concerned about the moves towards supporting nuclear power by some in the Green Party. Now, I would like to know whether the candidates would support Hinkley Point C, as it is already underway, and what do they think about Sizewell C?
Okay, the first person to answer this one is Amelia.
Thank you. I think that nuclear power is essentially private profit versus public risk. I think that when people talk about the benefits to the environment, what's often missing is the discussions about the wider implications of even building a nuclear power plant, let alone what that risk looks like. If you look to Greens in Germany, actually, they had a small nuclear leak in recent years. Essentially, the government had to clear that up, and it cost, the cleanup operation cost more financially before you even take into account the health risks and the ecological risks than the original company had ever made. And I think it really highlights the way that our operations work with these risks. I think that nuclear power is too big a risk. I think that if we have political will to invest in renewables, well, if we have political will to invest in nuclear, we should have political will to invest in renewables that make sure that we are protecting not just from the risk of climate change, but from the risk of a nuclear disaster as well.
Thank you very much. And Cleo, your view?
Yeah, my view is that I don't support either, and that we should be heading down the road of renewables. I think one of the, I wouldn't say trap, but one of the arguments that's often peddled out, certainly where I am in Bristol as well, which is just down the road from Bridgewater, is this point about jobs. Of course, jobs are important, but I think, you know, as we move forward, it is about sustainability and green jobs and feeding into that, of course, in collaboration with listening and working with our unions. That is key. You know, we do have to create and protect jobs, but it can't be at every cost or any cost. So yeah, I think also we're quite often also given the line in politics, well, we've started now, so, you know, it may have gone thousands or millions over budget, but we've started now, so we have to finish. I think we need to challenge that view, and that actually it isn't too late to pull back and say, no, this isn't a good idea, and actually, no, we can't afford it, let's scrap it.
Thank you very much. Nick?
I haven't read too much into nuclear. I'm not an expert on it. But I will say, it seems like it can't be that great. We spend lots of time building it. I don't know how long it's taken so far to do things. It takes forever. And then you run it for about 50 to 80 years, and then you turn it off and it just sits there forever. That doesn't seem like a good idea. It seems like a pretty poor way to produce energy. I think that we obviously have to focus on renewables, because renewables, straight up, they're better. But I'm not necessarily like actively against nuclear. I think that we need to make sure the focus is on renewables. And we need to make sure the people that are saying that nuclear has to be part of the energy transition, we need to make sure they're not letting nuclear allow us to underinvest in renewables. Renewables has to be the priority, but I can't say personally. I'd hope that, again, the policy process of our members, I hope our members can help with letting me know whether nuclear has to be part of that. But yeah, we shouldn't let people use nuclear to spend less in renewables when we should be focusing on that as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then Tom.
Well, thank you. I was a renewable energy nerd before I got into politics, so I feel like I know a little bit too much about this to get into everything. But I don't support nuclear power in the UK as things stand, and I don't not support it because of necessarily because of safety concerns. I think that nuclear power actually does tend to be very safe in the UK. For me, it's more about cost and storage, because we're spending a huge amount of taxpayers' cash, and it's not competitive with a lot of other types of electricity generation, such as renewables and storage, because nuclear power stations produce an awful lot of materials which are dangerous, and storing that is a massive issue. Do you site it next to a community that doesn't want it? Do you do something creative like try and fire it into the sun, which might be a bit too costly and dangerous? Or do you try and store it in the Arctic or the Antarctic, which is unknown technology at the moment, but it has been, I'm pretty sure that's been explored by the UK government previously. Also, nuclear power is vital for supplying the nuclear weapons industry with nuclear materials to go on warheads. I think that if we can get rid of nuclear power and undermine the nuclear stockpile, then that would be in the interest of peace and making sure that we don't have the opportunity to go and commit an atrocity somewhere. But as I said at the beginning, part of the reason that I got into political environmentalism was because of visiting the Jet Fusion facility in Oxfordshire, which was an experimental nuclear reactor using fusion, which is different to fission. And I would just say that if some kind of silver bullet technology comes along and answers all of our concerns about safety and storage and not supplying, nuclear warheads, then let's go for it. But that doesn't exist yet. So no at the moment from me.
Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to the next question then, please, from Tony.
Okay, from Bill and Shan to everyone. What do candidates wish to say about equalities and diversity?
And the first person, it's not much a question, that is it? But anyway, let's frame it as a question. What are your views on this issue? Can we have Cleo first, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, it's not a tick box exercise, is it? And I think, well, hopefully most of us have seen, if we hadn't seen it before, that there's a global pandemic in terms of racism, which run alongside the pandemic of COVID. And I think it's important to recognize that. And it's been brought to all of our attention over the last month or so. This is real. This is real, and it's a killer. So when we think of diversity in terms of race, it's really important that from wherever we start and wherever we stand today and whatever we understand, it's important that we can foster a sense of empathy, understanding, education, and have a vision for the UK and wider. We've also seen, and I can't presume you're all Remainers, but you may be, or we may have a lot of Remainers here. We've seen how Brexit has affected our communities, certainly has down where I am in Bristol. So my view on diversity and equalities as well, as I said earlier, is that it is our difference that makes us stronger. And I think also what I would say is sometimes we need to be in an environment, particularly if we think about our Green Party community in its widest sense, where we can actually come together, have an open conversation, and sometimes get things wrong. We need to have spaces where we can learn and not feel that we might have not, I love your accent, Arnold, and I would love to imitate it, but am I allowed to? I don't know. Yeah. That's politically wrong. And I think we need to have a space where we can get things wrong in order to get things right. But we need to do better as a party to be obviously diverse.
Thank you very much. And next person to come on that subject is Nick.
Yeah, we have a huge problem with diversity in the party. Pretty much everyone's white. A lot of people are kind of 45 and older. Those aren't bad things. Like, I don't think we should get rid of white people from our party, but we need to make sure that we're actually able to represent everyone. And the best way to make sure that we can deliver a society that works for everyone is to get everyone feeding into it. And if it's only mostly white people in a room deciding those policies, then people are going to be overlooked because each person brings their own experience. I have a very limited set of experiences growing up, and it's different to other people's experiences. If we can get those voices in and actually spend time genuinely listening to them, then we can make policies that are better, and we can know how to speak to different communities better to make sure that we can help them have a society that works for them as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, and can I have your response to that, Tom, please?
Yeah. I'd just like to kind of reiterate a point that Cleo said about it's important not to treat this as a tick box exercise, which can be very tempting because it's a very complicated issue. And it's, can you hear me okay? You just all froze for a sec.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Good. Yeah, it's very complicated, and it's tempting to try and come up with a simple policy solution, and that's not going to be the way to do it, because it is so ingrained into everything, systems of privilege and oppression, as we're kind of learning as a society as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement most recently, like with the police and justice system and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so things like white supremacy, the patriarchy, class, all those, the whole intersection of privilege and oppression, we ourselves as a party need to make ourselves more representative and diverse. We've been quite successful at putting women into positions of power in our party, but we need to do that for the whole set of intersections, such as, you know, race, ethnicity, class, educational background, not being so London-centric, all those kind of things. I think that Greens, as an activist group, and like, you know, in the wider climate movement, we've been very good at getting organisations and decision makers to thread sustainability through their decision making processes. And if we can do a similar thing with equality and diversity, then that'd be fantastic. But we've got an awfully long way to go. There's a huge amount of education that needs to happen between now and that point. Yeah, so we need to do that for ourselves as a party, for the movement, because the movement is way too middle class and white, the climate movement, I mean. And to then try and apply that to wider society. I mean, I'm a big fan of the stuff that Amelia is doing on making misogyny a hate crime. We've seen a huge rise in domestic violence by men against women since lockdown, and it'd be great if we could make things like that happen.
Thank you very much. And finally, Amelia.
I think this question breaks down to three sections, and that's diversity and equalities as a party, in politics, and as a society. Because I think that we know that we need to be making sure as a party that we represent the values that we talk about, making sure that we're supporting diverse candidates, making sure that we're supporting diversity in our party. I have been trying to work to make sure that we have 50% women in our as candidates. Unfortunately, the snap general elections aren't something that we're able to build up the support that's so desperately needed to make sure that we are able to do that. And even the structures that we put in place, such as reopening nominations, if they've not been diverse, have often been stopped as a result of the speed that we've had to do for those snap general elections. As I said, I've also ring-fenced money to make sure that we remove the barriers as to why diverse candidates aren't standing, to make sure that there's finances to access things like childcare or to access BSL translation, things like that if it's needed. In politics, diversity is incredibly all diversities are incredibly underrepresented. It's been incredible to hear the stories of Dawn Butler within Parliament itself, of the racism and misogyny that she experiences. And I've worked cross-party with women from all parties to make sure that we're tackling some of these issues within politics itself, talking about how we talk to each other better. And I actually currently sit on a House of Lords committee about how we work with other parties to ensure that we are challenging some of the hostile situations that we experience on social media, as well as in real life when it comes to different forms of bigotry that comes out. And then in society, I think it's really important that we do remember our own power of things that we're able to change. The work that I've been doing to make misogyny a hate crime, again, I've been working to speak out about that, using my own experiences of domestic violence, as well as working cross-party to make sure that we are collaborating to essentially make that change happen. As somebody who isn't currently an MP, it's vital that we ensure that we use all of our campaigning to make change happen. And while I worked with Grenfell Tower, I remembered my own.
We've lost Amelia's microphone's gone off, Tom.
It's time. It's run out of time, Arnold.
Oh, sorry. I apologise.
I gave her 10 seconds extra.
All
It
right,
was
okay.
wonderful.
I looked down at my notes and I looked back up because it stopped so abruptly. And I apologise to Amelia for that abruptness, but I also apologise for getting that wrong. Right, so I was looking at my notes. I think we have to move on to the next question, Tony.
Okay, there's actually two questions which are quite similar, so I'm going to put the two together. It's from Claire and from Dawn Finesse, and it's Green Party members make policy. What involvement do you have with the policy making process outside of attending conference? And how can women with caring commitments, both children and elderly relatives, still participate in policy making and conference?
Okay, I'm going to start with Nick on that one, please.
So in terms of outside of conference making policy, I'm involved in the Young Greens and have done the position of Structure and Procedures Committee Chair, which is kind of like SOC. They're the ones that make sure everyone follows the Constitution. I've done that for the past 2 years now, and we have that coming up. So there's a lot of policy that I want to put in to make sure that we can have an even more democratic and fairer process to make sure the Young Greens can succeed even more than they've already succeeded. What was the other question? What was it? How can we move carrying commitments? Yeah, I think it's a problem. I know there's a member I'm friends with who always brings it up every conference. For the people that have childcare and responsibilities that turn up to conference, we have a tendency to just want to extend the time of conference, and every time they're there saying you can't just extend the time, people have to go to their children, some other things they have to do. I think we should look at trying to use the fact that everyone's using Zoom and try and have policy discussions more regularly and more openly and more available for people to turn up and have those discussions way before conference. It's too late to wait till conference to have those discussions and debates. We should be having all of that feed-in happening earlier, because then there'll be less amendments, and that means we can actually put policy. We are a party that really cares about how good our policy is, and we need to be able to put it through faster. So if there's less amendments, we can keep policy more up to date than other parties, which is a strength for us to have.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next person to comment on that is going to be Tom, please.
Cool. Would it be possible to get the first question repeated? Because I just got fixated on the second one.
Do you just want the first one, or also the two?
Both, yeah, go for both, please.
Okay, yeah. So the Green Party members make policy. What involvement do you have with policy making process outside of attending conference? And how can women with caring commitments, both children and elderly relatives, still participate in policy making and conference?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So on policy making outside of conference, I mean, the vast majority of the policy work that I've done has not been at conference, because it's like, you know, a possible four days in a year. I mean, in the Green Party, obviously, conference is the ultimate body that makes policy. But in terms of discussions in the Green Party, I've been involved in discussions on the Green Party executive, on the Young Greens executive, discussing what we want to campaign for the wider party to support, and in lots of different local parties, because I've moved around quite a bit. So I've been in Plymouth and Watford and Southwark, and now in Brighton and Hove. So I've been involved in lots of local party discussions about this sort of stuff. But also professionally, I've been involved in a lot of cross-party parliamentary work. For instance, I worked with a group of MPs and peers that I brought together when I set up an all-party parliamentary group on the role of the House of Lords, and that involved discussing with those people who have very, very different opinions to work out areas of consensus, and to try and move forward together. And we did do that, and I got a very right-wing backbench Conservative and a kind of soft left Labour MP to both agree to try and amend the Queen's speech after the illegal prorogation, but then the illegal prorogation was said to be illegal, so that couldn't happen. And then about the second question, I obviously don't have much time, but about women with children and care responsibilities. On the children's side, I would say that we should explore getting creches and facilities at conference to be able to give them some space and some time to be able to focus on conference work. And for people with responsibilities for older people like parents, then yeah, we need to be able to do things like make conference more accessible online, and we're going to have this big discussion internally about reform of conference voting, and I think that's going to be really interesting, especially things like keeping to time, like I'm about to do now.
Well done. Do you know, one of the difficult things about chairing these meetings is that you get absorbed in people's responses and answers to questions. And I sitting there thinking, what am I going to do next? And because I was so intrigued about what was being said over this issue. Next person to answer on this is Amelia.
Thank you. I think in terms of policy work, I have put forward policies to conference, probably the biggest of which has been the policy on Brexit, and making sure that we supported a people's vote, making sure that even before that we were working to champion the kind of Europe that we wanted, the Europe of human rights, of workers' rights, of environmental protection and peace, and making sure that we had a clear green message on that. As a result of our cycles, our conference cycles, we were a little bit in the dark with very clear policy at that point, so I brought that forward at that time. I think I've also been involved in Policy Fest and talking to different groups on policy and how we develop it from that angle. In terms of the facilities at conference and accessibility, this has been something that I've been talking about for years as well, and I think it's really important that we talk about this from all perspectives. Those with different disabilities aren't able to access it. When I've been in different communities with local parties, I meet people with agoraphobia, I meet people that have broad ranges of reasons why they can't attend conference, and it's horrendous that it's taken a global pandemic for us to start to consider how we bring this online more. I think that, again, it's the barriers to this is always financial, and I think it's really important that what we've put in place this last year is a clear fundraising project that I think has an opportunity to make sure that we're talking about many of these issues that I know are your priorities, because they're my priorities too. And even things like with the systems that we have at the moment, the creche facilities are not up to standard. You can probably hear my partner's kids in the background. I keep wondering if I should mute, so sorry about that. But the facilities the opening times aren't always clear, they're not always consistent. And as we move conferences, it means that there's always a changing goalpost of what people are expecting. I was going to very quickly summarise my points on Grenfell Tower, but I still don't have time, so.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Cleo, please.
Yeah, I think as it's been mentioned, feeding into local groups, or perhaps some of the equalities groups, for example, Greens of Colour, which I'm an active member of, that's another way of developing policy that can then go to conference, perhaps. I think also we should acknowledge the role of local parties and regional hubs that can develop policy based on experience that's happening within their region to feed into the whole, and also the work that our councillors do on the ground, which will give them quite often very tangible experience and understanding about what is affecting people, so that we can actually reflect that in our policy. Motions don't just happen over the conference time itself, of course, that seems quite obvious. It takes months to develop, it can take months or longer to develop this, sometimes years, sometimes it doesn't come to the conference until the year later. And I think it's really important, and what I have been involved in is actually collaborating with different campaign groups who may not actually be politically aligned, but they have a significant cause that they want championed. And I've seen members of the Green Party, me included, actually work with these campaigns to bring motions to conference, which is very positive. I think, yeah, accessibility is a really important issue. Again, going back to conference, it is encouraging that we're moving online, which hopefully should enable some people, but we have to be aware of digital exclusion. That may be a factor for some people, something I'm working on in Bristol. Cost and distance, also important. And also, you know, it's not going to suit everyone. Resource should be there if it's needed, and support, and work to reform voting, as we've said. Green Party Women actually had a mini conference recently, which was excellent. And again, people can feed into these smaller conferences that feed into the bigger ones.
Thank you very much. Well done on that timing. Right, we need another question, Tony, and we're doing great here. They're coming through. Got anything on different subjects?
Yes, are we ready? This is from Bill Walton. How would you highlight the relevance of the global impact of climate breakdown for people living in England and Wales?
Okay. Right, just repeat that, would you?
Okay, I will. How would you highlight the relevance of the global impact of climate breakdown for people living in England and Wales?
Okay. I asked him to repeat that because, Tom, you're first on this one, and you know, I wanted to give you 30 seconds to think about it.
Thank you.
So, Tom, it's you, please.
Okay, cool. I actually recently applied to a job which involved communicating about the impact of climate change. So I'm kind of going to use that. I'm going to use my talking points from that. So in England and Wales, communities are already experiencing climate breakdown. Like there was a Welsh village that was basically abandoned, I think. And that was in the news quite a lot recently because the sea was just going to come and take it away. I mean, I'm actually in Norfolk right now, and cliffs are just crumbling away. I'm sure that the rate of erosion on cliffs would be a lot lower if we didn't have increasingly severe weather events, and that applies across the country. So there's that kind of local, those local impacts of climate breakdown. Obviously, people aren't going to necessarily equate the two. So it's a job for the Green Party to communicate that and to make the links in the national media and in local media, you know, local activists. And I'm sure that lots of local activists do this. But in terms of the wider impact, that's kind of our bread and butter, isn't it? Trying to communicate about the urgency of climate breakdown, things like how we're going to lose 100% of coral reefs if we reach 2 degrees. That's not necessarily that relevant to people living in the UK, but it's a kind of visually impactful kind of thing to reference. There's obviously the kind of more dystopian stuff like people being forced from their homes and that leading to mass migration, which we're already seeing as a result of things like the civil war in Syria, which has been linked variously to climate change. And I feel like obviously we need to be really sensitive with those kind of things. It's not about scaremongering and saying that we're going to get loads of immigrants. We need to be opening our doors and helping people and using our position as a global leader, in theory, to be responsible and to help people.
Okay, thank you very much. And Amelia.
Thank you. I think it's important, as always, as Greens, we do hold that point of think global and act local. And I think that having worked with Greens around the world, most recently supporting and mentoring a Green from Kenya, talking about our shared problems around the lack of proportional representation as a priority, actually. But we need to be making sure that we're keeping those connections and amplifying voices on the specific issues of how climate change is affecting different communities opportunities. But we live in a globalized world, and globalization has been one of the reasons that we're experiencing such a huge climate and ecological breakdown. And so I think that we need to be making sure that we are tackling many of those systems that have been causing so many problems. To bring that relevance down, I was going to make the same point as Tom. To me, flooding is such an important way of talking about how both climate and ecology impact our local areas. I've worked actually with places in Yorkshire and Humber, up in Hebden Bridge, as well as other places across the country, about talking about how we can use natural flood defences, but using that as a platform to talk about climate change as a whole. We're only going to tackle flooding in a genuine way if we make sure that we stay below 1.5 degrees of warming and stop destroying our habitats and our landscapes. So I want to continue to do that work of ensuring that we are bringing those relevant topics to that local level, while also working internationally to amplify the stories that we are getting from Greens and individuals and campaigns around the world. On Grenfell Tower, remembered in that case, I used my own power. There was no translation in that community to this day. The emergency response from the council has not included any translation. So using my knowledge and power, I managed to make sure that we had funding from Lush actually, to ensure that translation happened.
Okay, thank you. And Cleo, please.
Yeah, there's a few strands to this. I mean, one of it is, how do you forge global empathy on a local level? Perhaps it is easier for me because I'm of a global South heritage, but I would like to think that one thing we do have within our party is empathy and a global understanding, an understanding of all of our global impact in the UK, across the world. It has to be taken seriously. It has to be understood in a way, as someone said, doesn't make people necessarily feel guilty, but can be explained in a very easy way. Education is key. Let's focus on what the curriculums are in our schools. Let's start there. Let's reform the education system. Let's also acknowledge, and I am actually running my own education projects to do with environmental and social justice for children who are primary school age. I think we have an amazing wave of young people in our country. Let's support them. Let's elevate them. Let's build on the work they've done in this field and see what we can do to support the next stage of action. Let's also, with young people, discuss fast fashion and the consequences of that, which have come shockingly to light in the last week or so, haven't they? When we think about COVID, when we think about Leicester, when we think about exploitation, this is happening here in the UK in 2020. It isn't some distant land such as Bangladesh, but the exploitation and the issues are right here and need to be tackled. I would say as well that I sit on the Avon Fire Authority, and as that I also represent on the National Strategic Resilience Board, and this is on our radar, this is in our planning. We know, working with environment agencies and others, we have to plan for the flood, for the defence, for the budget we're going to need, for all of these things that have to be put in place, because it's going to affect England and Wales. It already is.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. We have to say this is the last question, I'm afraid, because of the timings. So, Tony, pick a good one.
I'll pick two that I can amalgamate just the same, if that's okay.
Right.
So then, this is from Dawn, Finesse and Bill and Shannon. It is, if Green Party, if GPE, I can never say the whole thing, have the best policies with most people supporting them, why are we not capitalising on the popularity in the polls? And how do you think the Build Back Better campaign can help the party?
Right. Did you get that question?
I'll read it again. If the Green Party, if Green Party have the best policies with most people supporting them, why are we not capitalising on that popularity in the polls? And how do you think the Build Back Better campaign can help the party?
Okay. Right. It's you, Amelia.
So I think we are capitalising on the fact that we've got the best policies and we are rising in the polls. We're seeing the Lib Dems take a little bit of a drop, which is always very satisfying. We need to be ensuring that we have clear communication. And the last few months, it's been incredibly tough to get that breakthrough. It's why I've been quite imaginative of I'm currently working with different artists on universal basic income at the moment, and I should hopefully have an exclusive on with that in the next few weeks. But we need to be imaginative about how we get cut through in the media, because it's hard work as Greens to get cut through. It's why I've taken different actions to make sure that we hear our policies, whether that's going plastic free for a week, or as I said before, talking about my own experience of domestic violence. It's about having, we always need to be imaginative to get that cut through. And now more than ever, actually, it's been really tough. And that's why it's so powerful when we work at the grassroots level to make sure that people see our unique policies and what they mean to our communities. I think that's the power of our council elections that have got Greens elected across the country. And if you look at the West Midlands during the European elections, we didn't have the money to put out a free post to the West Midlands, but we won the seat because of what we were doing with the AIR campaign on social media, but also because so many people saw their hardworking candidates on their doorsteps. Their hardworking councillors constantly on their doorsteps. And the Build Back Better campaign, I think, is really powerful. It's about having a vision about what the hell was normal about before, and making sure that we genuinely challenge the fact that we had people sleeping rough on our streets, talking about the fact that there was vast inequalities, as well as a rising climate emergency. And I think it's vital that we collaborate on those shared visions while ensuring that our unique green vision has that cut through, because it's our vision that I think we need. That's why I believe every step we take should be towards ensuring we have a green government in the future.
Thank you. Okay, Cleo, your answer to this.
I often think it's because certain demographics do not see themselves represented in our leadership or in our party. So for them, sometimes the message doesn't even get through to them, because they've kind of already made up their mind that we're not speaking to them, perhaps we're speaking at them. So collaboration is key, so is talking and listening. I think I agree, how we communicate is really important. I think we are doing a reasonable job on our social media. I'm really encouraged to see some of the other groups within the Green Party and how they're really pushing forward and getting many, many gains on the social media, which is important. So yeah, being relatable is key, and having people see us as social justice advocates, you know, perhaps moving away from our traditional base is really important. It's frustrating, you know, that people who we represent well, our policies do a lot for people, but for whatever reason, it isn't translating to them. So we need to do better. Build Back Better, well, there's lots of work being done, I'm sure, in local council groups and local parties on a local level, understanding what it means to people on the ground, whether it's businesses who need to work more outside and understand social distancing, whether it's about more space for cycling and pedestrians, less cars, all of this. This is what it has to be moving forward. We need to keep lobbying. And that's the point, I think. We need to be coming up with actions. Again, digital inclusion is key moving forward in this new type of normal and building back better. Racial justice has to be part of it. Equity has to be part of it. Listening to people and working with people has to be part of it. We have to come up with the solutions together, and we need to act.
Thank you very much. Nick, your view on this?
So yeah, the question was, we have great policies. I agree. Why aren't we getting the popularity as a result? There's two reasons. Obviously, the electoral system is really difficult. I've mentioned before, I want to try and collaborate with other parties where possible. That doesn't necessarily mean the kind of alliances we've had in the past, where we stand down somewhere. It may be that we kind of agree with other parties to say, we're going to focus our resources here. By the way, do you mind not focusing any resources there, and they can do their resources somewhere else where we might spend a bit less time campaigning? I think there's totally options that we can find a way that alliances and collaboration with other parties can work. And doing that is how we're going to get our route to success of having more MPs elected. If we don't do that, and we like put our foot down and say never again, I don't think it's going to get much better than it is right now. The other reason why we're not capitalizing is messaging. I think we have this kind of inside the Green Party, people are quite informed, they're quite knowledged and like read up on climate and some of the social justice issues that we're fighting for. But I don't think most people understand those that clearly. And I think we need to be explaining things, not in a patronizing way, but in just a really clear and simple way, and talking about why things are good and why they should support them. I think a lot of the time we make assumptions that people might know exactly what we mean when we say socialism or what we mean when we say UBI. And I don't think it's a good idea to make that assumption. When it comes to Build Back Better, I think Build Back Better is a bad slogan. I don't think it's that useful. I don't think most people go like, oh, I know exactly what they're talking about when they say that to me. But I think the COVID has forced us into a different way of living, and it's allowed people to kind of open their mind a bit at how things could be different. And I think it's important that we do talk about doing things differently than they currently are, because things could be so much better.
Okay, thank you. Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of stuff has been covered already, but in terms of capitalising on our great policies, if we could crack the answer to this question, then we could get in power. Like, it's as simple as that. And it's because we haven't answered that effectively in terms of our actions. That's why we're stuck at 3 or 4% in the polls. I think that we obviously need to get more media exposure, because the amount of people that I speak to who say, why aren't the Greens in the media more? Like, you should get more in the media. And it's obviously not as simple as just clicking your fingers and getting on Sky every night or whatever. I think that one of the things I want to do as deputy leader is to be more clear about our politics. So not just our policies, but where our political identity sits. And I mean, I believe that the Green Party is eco-socialist and anti-capitalist, but we don't need to necessarily use those words, because those words can be quite alienating if you're not a political nerd, which the vast majority of the country isn't. I think that Natalie Bennett did a fantastic job of communicating how social justice is intrinsically interlinked with climate justice, and that is how we did so well under when Ed Miliband was the Labour leader, and we took the ground as a unique position as the main anti-austerity party. And I think that we can probably try to reclaim that with Keir Starmer going back to the right. And with 30 seconds on Build Back Better, I think that us as a movement are not good at slogans. I think that the right are very good at slogans, because we're all talking about all the different phrases that Number 10 comes out with for the pandemic. But we do have a great opportunity to be the most radical voice in the whole conversation about Build Back Better and a green recovery, because we have the most ambitious policies. And if we can use that opportunity, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, that's it for questions. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to your 2 minutes summing up. And we're going to, as they do in the Eurovision Song Contest or whatever, do it in reverse order from the opening bit. So the first summing up is going to be yours, Tom. And then we're going to just give you advance warning, Tom Franklin, that we're going to go to the video from Andrea. Okay, so Tom, please.
Cool, thank you. So I didn't speak much about my experience in my opening statement, so I'm going to speak about that now. In terms of my professional experience, I've worked in energy and climate communications and policy at like the national and EU level since leaving university in 2014. I've worked cross-party in Parliament on issues such as reforming the House of Lords, which could deliver things like getting more Greens in and making the House of Lords more diverse and not so full of aristocrats. I've also campaigned on things like carbon monoxide poisoning, because that was a job I did, and that's obviously a really important issue. Making sure that people have safe boilers, which tends to affect people from lower income backgrounds. I've also done a lot of political comment in the media, so I've written for the Eye and the Times and the Ecologist, and I've been on LBC and BBC Radio and TV. During the 2019 general election, the constituency that I ran in suddenly got a lot of attention because the incumbent Conservative ran as an independent against the official Conservative. And so I suddenly had to do a bunch of media that I was not ready for. So that was a big learning curve. But I'd love to do a lot more of that, obviously. In terms of vision, I'll just reiterate what I've said before, that I think we need to be clear about our position as Greens, and that means that we're a Green and left organisation. That, as I said, that doesn't necessarily mean saying eco-socialist, wanting alternatives to neoliberalism, but communicating it in a way that makes sense, like Natalie Bennett did. Rebuild our credibility on trans rights and non-binary rights, and for LGBTIQ+ people, because we've taken a big hit, I believe, in terms of respect amongst that community in particular. And we need to ask big to get big. We need to try and get Greens in government. And I think that if you can make people believe that that's a possibility, they'll be more likely to vote Green.
Thank you very much. So we go to the pre-recorded summing up from Andrea, please.
As a Green Party woman, I have caring responsibilities. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to make all of the hustings in this current leadership campaign. However, I'm taking this opportunity to impress upon you my enthusiasm for campaigning within the Green Party, and for Green Party women to work on campaigns to raise their profile using things like the Ethical Care Charter. This Ethical Care Charter is a unison initiative that helps women providing home care services to people, and also helps those women who are clients receiving that home care. It's a really important initiative, especially post-COVID-19, to ensure that people get a better quality of care, because the minimum time of care goes up from 15 minutes, which is barely a visit, to a 30-minute call. And also for the women providing the care, it means that they can actually get paid between their client visits for the travel time between their various clients. And also they get a living wage, either London or out of London living wage, but they get a decent wage for doing a very good job. And that's really, really important. The other thing for Green Party women that we're really keen on is to highlight this climate emergency that's affecting the whole planet, but most especially women in other less developed countries. And that would be bringing together an all-party group of women and organisations led by Green Party women and Rosamund Adukisi-Deborah, the Green Party women's spokesperson for air pollution, and to really discuss and debate a strategy for getting the Green Party Green New Deal taken up by Parliament. I hope you'll support me in this campaign, but also to vote for Greens of Colour as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the next person to sum up is Amelia. And microphone, Tom, please. Amelia, just bet your microphone's not on, Amelia. Tom's sorting it. You're on now.
Okay.
We haven't started the clock.
Thank you so much for being here today and taking part in this. It's been a really fantastic discussion. You know me, I've been your deputy leader for the last 6 years. You've seen me work with persistence. You've seen me work in your local communities. You've seen me get our key messages out there. 6 years isn't a long time in politics. It would normally just be one election cycle. But what we've done in that time is radically transform the party about how we build our success, and ensuring that we're building that from the grassroots, which is where I believe politics happens and where I will always continue to put my support. We've talked a lot about why Greens don't get cut through, and there have been mentions a few times about the electoral system. With the Welsh Parliament elections coming up just next year, it's a chance for us to vote to get Greens elected under a proportional system where there are votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. This is a huge opportunity for us. And as I said before, I want to ensure that I use my platform as Deputy Leader to get that historic seat for us in the Welsh Parliament and make sure that we are getting yet another voice in yet another chamber. I also believe that what we need to be doing at the moment to build on that success is to build for the next general election, which should be 4 years away, but the work really needs to begin now. With all of my experience of working in strategy and delivering 3 general elections in just such a short time, I want to ensure that we're putting those foundations in place because we deserve more Greens to get elected. I see all the work you do. I see you making change happen. And what we ultimately want is more Greens in Parliament because we're beating first past the post in our council elections. And although we are campaigning to change the system, whether that's on House of Lords reform or whether that's proportional representation, we must take advantage of our knowledge and experience to make sure we get more Greens elected at every opportunity.
Thank you very much. Cleo.
Hey, well, I've really enjoyed my time with you today, and I'm not sure if I've got a sense of what concerns you as a region, but that would be really important to me if I was your Deputy Leader. I'm respected and credible. I have a track record. I love meeting people, and I'd be on the ground, north, south, east, and west. We must strive for unity and our shared humanity. I'm a listener, and I'm always open to learning. I can only be myself, but I think authenticity is a quality that I hope you all respect and embrace. I am bold, I am brave, I can do the job justice, and I'd love the opportunity to do the job. I believe that I would be a great advocate for the party and a good front person. And I think that would encourage some of the diversity that we desperately need to engage with us. Equally, my work with young people, I believe I could build on that and nurture the next generation of brilliance coming through behind me, behind us. The movement is intergenerational, and that must be harnessed. As I've said, I would love the opportunity to work for you and with you, and for the others, the thousands of people who desperately need our policies to become a reality.
Thank you very much, Cleo. And then finally, Nick.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about how I got into politics. So up until the age of 21, I always thought from an outside perspective, and I think a lot of people around the country will share this perspective too. There are a couple of parties, you vote for one, sometimes they get in, then the other side criticizes them, nothing really happens, and then that's kind of what politics is. I was kind of fortunate in that I randomly happened to decide to start learning a little bit about politics to try and work out a way to make change and make the world a better place. And I saw politics as a way to do that. I think there's a lot of people like me that aren't that interested in politics. And I really want to champion a movement that brings those people in and says, politics is literally about people and the society around them. So everyone should identify as a politician, really. Everyone should have a say in what politics should be. So I really want to work with you and all the people we have around the Green Party to work out how we can bring those people in. Because, the main realization for me with this was I was watching Victoria Derbyshire in the last election, and they had people there who were undecided voters. And I was amazed to see that people could be like, oh, I'm not sure whether to support Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn. I did not think that that was something that anyone could ever consider. And I think it's kind of a suggestion that we're pretty out of touch. So we do need to pay attention and listen and try and bring those people in, because there's millions of votes out there of people that are just choosing based on that election. And if we can get them to vote for us, which I think we can, because we have the policies that make sense and the policies that are about caring and being compassionate, I think we can get our policies put into place. And at the end of it, that's our goal. Our goal as a political party is to make our great policies a reality, because that will change things for the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that's